Then the construction of a historical self becomes crucial in the text and their interpretation. So here we are going to see how that person's self was, how he was as a person, and how that personality has reflected into the text. And by that way, we can have a better interpretation of his writings. So he was highly intellectual person and he had that intellectual approach to poetry. He relied on scientific ideas instead of the poetic ideas which were passed on from earlier generations to the generation of John Donne, in which he was writing poetry. Metaphysical concerns are the common subject of their poetry. That's why they are called as metaphysical poetry. And they wanted to investigate the world by rational discussion of its phenomena rather than by intuition or mysticism. So by that way, they wanted to know their appearance, or they wanted to understand the things beyond their physical appearances. And then we come to the main subject that we are going to discuss with, is holy sonnets. Friends, sonnet is a type of poetry, as we all know that it is a type of poetry in which there are 14 lines, and every poet or a group of poets have divided those 14 lines in different patterns. If we look at the Shakespearean division of the 14 lines, we find that there will be four lines of three stanzas, that means four quatrains, and last two lines will be rhyming with each other and they will be called as couplets. So three quatrains and one couplet combined together become 14 lines, and that is Shakespearean stanza. Then we have the poetry of sonnets by Petrarch, and Petrarchan sonnets are differently divided by their lines. If we look at the Petrarchan stanza composition, then first eight lines are called as octave, and the next six lines are called as sestet. So generally, between octave and sestet, there is a relationship. Sometimes it is a continuation of the theme. Sometimes there is contradictory emotion, or sometimes there is a question is posed in octave, and in sestet there is an answer given to it. So by that way, lines are differently divided, and rhyming schemes also differ according to these types. So, if we look at the holy sonnets of John Donne, then one thing more that we should mention here is, in today's times in India, we see that since last more than 2 centuries, ghazal is the format in Hindi or Urdu poetry which is very dominant. People appreciate listening to ghazals. People appreciate sharing the ghazals. So, ghazal is in its heyday during the last 200 years. During the times of William Shakespeare and before him and also after him, sonnet was that type. People used to write sonnet sequences, and every major poet you will find that he has written sonnets. So sonnet was the form of poetry. Then in the later century, lyric came, and then in 20th century and 21st century, we have free verse as the most commonly used format of poetry. So it was during the heyday of sonnets when John Donne was writing, and even during those times, sonnets were basically dealing with the themes of chivalric love, chivalric romance, or the romance of common people also, as we find in William Shakespeare's poetry. But John Donne, he was writing sonnets for holy reasons also. We find Herbert Spencer's sonnets, Robert Herrick's sonnets also falling into the same tradition. So these are sonnets, but not love sonnets. These are holy sonnets. Holy, you understand, holy means pious or sacrosanct or religious, something that has a tone of fight. So that is holy, and John Donne's sonnets are holy sonnets. Now, one thing is very interesting that though he was writing sonnets, these were not published in the book form during the whole of John Donne's lifetime. They were just known to a small circle of his friends. So he used to write the sonnets and read those sonnets to his friends only. These sonnets were not known to the public at large because they were not published in the book form. Um, Today, we do not have any manuscript of John Donne's writing in original. Scholars have only numerous differing versions transcribed by others to work with. That means the original manuscript is lost, and today we have the manuscripts written by other people, those who knew the poetry or those who have read it somewhere, and whatever they have written down, those things are with us. And in this case, the critic Helen Gardner has something to say. She says, the image of a soul in meditation, which the holy sonnets present, in an image of soul working out its salvation in fear and trembling. So this is a common theme that is running in the holy sonnets of John Donne. She says, what do we get the feeling of when we read these sonnets? We feel that there is a soul which is in meditation. And here we find out the soul which is working out for its salvation in fear and trembling. So the guilt, the remorse, or the feeling of God fearingness we find in the sonnets of John Donne. Biographer R. Scott, who has written the biography of John Donne, he says, Donne's sonnets were the ruminations of a man in a spiritual crisis. So he points out a new fact that John Donne's sonnets are the product of the crisis in which he was going. These are the product of his innate melancholy temperament. So by temperament, he is akin to Hamlet. He is called as melancholy in temperament. His reduced circumstances, as I told you that he was suffering from many setbacks. His children died, his wife died, and he was living a life, lonely life without any prospects of remarriage. And he also didn't have the direction to his professional life. So during these turbulent times, he has written these sonnets, and that's why we find out there is a spiritual crisis which is noted down in his poetry. Then, if we look at the holy sonnets of John Donne, then there are questions about faith, then God's mercy and judgment, the issues of human mortality and the immortality of the soul, sin, damnation, absolution, and salvation. These are the major keywords, or we can say these are the major themes with which John Donne works in his sonnets. Now, in his sonnets, he expresses despair about his own salvation and reveals his fear of death. The holy sonnets are the product of a doubter, one who has not yet found inner peace. So, these again are the themes of his sonnets. Here we find out despair that he finds with himself, his connection with the God. He is worried that whether he will salvation, whether he will achieve salvation. And he has also this fear of death that he may die soon without producing something great, just like Milton had said in his famous sonnet on his blindness. He also had similar kind of fears that he may die without producing something of a worthwhile. And then his sonnets are the product of a doubter, one who has not yet found inner peace. So if we read the sonnets, we come to know, as the critic says, that we come to know that he was living in those times when he did not have that inner peace, and he was living in a doubt whether what he's doing is right. Is it will that be approved by God? These were his thoughts during those times. Now let us focus on the culture and the thoughts in which he was living. The time was the time of Renaissance in England. So Renaissance began in 13th century in Italy. Then it reached its peak at the 16th century in Europe. People's thoughts ventured away from the restriction of feudal belief of God and religion and became more realistic and human. This was a great emancipation, which led to the works by people such as Francis Bacon and Shakespeare. So he was living during those times when the people were emancipated. They were freed from uh, old belief of God and religion, and they wanted to explore science. They wanted to explore new possibilities of understanding, new possibilities of knowledge. If you look at painting of those times, this is a Renaissance scholar's reading desk. This is a very interesting painting, and you can find out many interesting things here. So you can find here there is one glassware which is used for experimentation in alchemy or any other subject. Then you can also see a compass there, which is used for geometry and geography, chartering the uncharted territories, going into the sea. Then there is a book. Then there is a bone, physiology, anatomy of man, understanding the physical attributes of a person. Then there is a big book. Then you can also find a musical instrument. You can find out in the background there is a sword and skull of man. These are the different types of subjects, different types of topics that the Renaissance scholars were dealing with. That's why it is a notable kind of picture. It tells how differently these people were interested in the world. Uh, the expertise kind of idea came later on. During those times, every person believed that man has immense capabilities and he can get as more knowledge as he wants. And so that he should not limit himself to one topic. He should read more and he should read from wide range of subjects. And that you can see in this picture. Now let us deal with the sonnet, the poem itself that is prescribed for our syllabus. It is called as Holy Sonnet 14. 14 is the number of that sonnet in that sonnet sequence. So it is a holy sonnet, as I told you earlier, what is meant by holy and how sonnets were very significant during those times. Now, first of all, let us take a reading of this poem. If you look at the structure of the poem, you can find out it is divided in Petrarchan sonnet style. 8 lines combined together form into a stanza of 8 lines, octave, and then last 6 lines are separated from the earlier 8 lines, and the 6 lines are called as sestet. So octave and sestet. So first of all, let us read these lines. Batter my heart, 3% God. For you, as yet but not, breathe, shine, and seek to mend, that I may rise and stand. Overthrow me and bend. You are forced to break, blow, burn, and make me new. I, like an usurped town to another due, labor to admit you, but oh, to no end. Reason, your viceroy in me should defend, but is captive and proves weak or